Hello and welcome to See Hear Love. I'm your host, Melinda Estabrooks, and today we begin a three-part series focusing on the theme, We Know What Real Love Is. And it's based on this verse, 1 John 3:16-18, that says, we know what real love is because Jesus gave up his life for us. So we also ought to give up our lives for our brothers and sisters. And if someone has enough money to live well and sees a brother or sister in need, but shows no compassion, how can God's love be in that person? Dear children, let's not merely say that we love each other, but let us show the truth by our actions. Wow, it's a big verse. And to help kick off this new series, I have my fabulous co-hosts to my right, Cheryl and Joanna.
Hi.
Welcome. Nice seat, nice location.
I'm in a different place.
Got my girl beside me.
This is going to be trouble, but it's going to be good.
Yeah.
And we have special husband and wife guests, Nigel and Jessie Paul. They are the founder and directors of Move In, where their vision is to see thousands of regular Christians prayerfully moving in to neighborhoods all over the world to live among the unreached and urban poor. Welcome.
Thank you.
Such a privilege to have you guys here. Now, when you hear that verse, as I just said, 1 John 3:16-18, what comes to mind, especially in the work that you do in Move In? And maybe you can explain a little bit about the genesis of it, but how does that connect with you when you hear that verse?
That verse is an impossible one, I think, and I feel that we've just begun to even have an understanding of what it might even mean. You know, it's something we think about a lot in Move In is the world, that 1 billion people live in slums, that thousands of people are dying daily who don't need to. And here we are in one of the most affluent countries in the world, and yes, we've moved into high needs neighborhoods, but wow, how could we ever relate to somebody who's making their living in a garbage tip in Manila in the Philippines? So yeah, when I hear that verse, I just am humbled and ask God, Lord, help me to just take an inch, move an inch towards what you're calling us to. So,
Jessie, what about you? When you hear the verse, what does it mean to you?
I just find it so inspiring to, I'm reminded, there's a verse that we love in our movement, Move In, which is 2 Corinthians 8, verse 9, and it's saying how, this is my paraphrase of it, but Jesus, he was so rich, he became poor so that we, through his poverty, could become rich. And so in Move In, our heart is, what does it take to share the good news of Jesus with people who've never heard it before? And sometimes that means not living in the best neighborhoods that we could afford, or doing things that maybe our culture wouldn't celebrate, but going to places to share the good news of Jesus with people who've never heard it before. So,
Wow.
That's incredible.
I know it is incredible. What about for the two of you, when you hear this verse, just quickly, what resonates and comes to mind when you hear that?
I mean, for me, immediately, it's kind of, Nigel, what you said, like, oh, there's like a lot of gap between where I am and what the real definition of love is. Because I think a lot of us, we talk about ourselves as loving people. I don't think many people are like, I'm a hateful person. You know, I don't care about my neighbors.
Yeah.
But when we look at how we spend our time, our money, our resources, actually, it's probably closer to reflecting that being the true thing. In another show we've had here, there was a challenge. We were talking about how even the choices we make in what we purchase are, like the clothes that we're wearing and many other things are making decisions to hurt other people. And we're not saying it, we're not doing it actively, but there's just so much of a gap between where we are today and what this laying down of your life in love looks like.
That's good. Cheryl?
Such a important and much needed scripture, but really challenging. I gotta go with my family over here. A redefining and a reprogramming of what love really is, and I think we need to sort of shed wrong thinking about it and really take this on and walk this out. It's a tough one.
It is.
Well, I think of like the love that you've talked about a number of times about your own story on this show, and like what love looked like to you when you were in like one of the lowest, the lowest or one of the lowest places of your life. It was a coffee
And a
And a
donut.
donut.
And a donut. Yep.
That's someone, I mean, you can say more.
Yeah,
but-
that was
Best verse in the Bible for me, chapter coffee, verse donut.
done.
Let's turn, shall we?
Yeah.
But just meaning that was just sort of the practical representation and the most heartfelt. When I lived on the street, it was powerful. It was transforming.
Yeah.
And it is this. And now here I am on this side of faith, Joanna, struggling with this verse, and yet I am a recipient.
Right. Aren't we all?
So aren't we all that? We all have that. Yes.
Like
I
that's
know.
hitting me.
I know.
All of us in
Yeah.
some way
Yeah.
are recipients of this verse because someone dared to love,
Absolutely.
and yet we're like, oh.
I know.
Yeah.
I want to kind of focus on the
Sure.
two of you because there's a lot here that we can learn from you, and we want to be learners
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
people who are actually really doing it. So let's talk about the start of how this all came to be about Move In, because I know it came from a verse. There was a verse that came about for you that really encouraged you to do this work, and then share a little bit about the story and how it came to be.
Yeah. Well, I was born in Zambia, and my father was born in Congo, and my grandmother was born in South Africa. And my grandfather spent 17 years in a thatched hut in the middle of Africa translating the Bible. So my story begins far before I was born. I was born into that, and so that's a gift that God gave to me of the world, of thinking about the world. Also a burden, but a joyful opportunity. And so as I grew up, I've always been a bit of an entrepreneur too. And sometimes entrepreneurs, in a spiritual sense, are mobilizers, so I love mobilizing. And God was planting things in me for the poor, for unreached people. And after doing a year of being somebody's assistant, a mission called OM, the founder, I carried his bags in 20 countries on 6 continents in 1 year. And when I came back, I joined a small ministry in Toronto, and while I was part of that ministry, the Lord gave me the vision for Move In. Actually, those 2 words, Move In, and it was a call to believers to consider moving into the highest needs neighborhoods they could find, to move in on the other side of the tracks, to do the opposite of what we all naturally do, not only as believers, but as human beings, which is to live in the nicest neighborhood we can afford, but to actually do the opposite of that. So it was a call to that, to prayerfully move in as regular people. So that was 9 years ago. We're still a young movement. The average age in our movement is 28. There are 400 people, 70 of which are kids. 80 teams, 80 teams in 31 cities and now in 12 countries.
Yeah.
And it's growing significantly, and we want to be used of God as much as He'll let us, to see believers moving in among the bottom billion people of the world, among the bottom 2 or 3 billion people of the world. You know, the bottom billion people of the world are so poor that they're life-threateningly poor.
Right.
That a toothache can take them out. So when we get a toothache, we go to the dentist and we get it fixed. But when you're life-threateningly poor, a toothache can become an infection that goes to your brain and kills you.
Yeah.
And that's why thousands of
Prevents
children.
you from working.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's so many things. So what if the church was lovingly and prayerfully present among the bottom billion? You know, 200 years ago, there were some new frontiers. The continent of Africa was a new frontier. China was a new frontier. Today, in 2018, there's a new frontier, which is for believers to move in among the bottom billion people of the world. And you will not find many organizations in the whole world who are doing that. And so it's exciting, but it's also really, there's so much amazingness in being present among the poor, and
I have a question though, because you have this great passion, Nigel, but here's Jessie, and I'm wondering, was it because you're with him or married to him that you were got the passion as well? Or is there something in you individually that when you guys met, then it was something natural to do? Because, you know, one person may have the passion, the other person might not. One person may feel the call of God to do something and somebody else won't, but the two of you are doing this together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think actually at the first ever Move-In conference, a mutual friend asked me to volunteer, and so I was there, front row middle, so excited. And I just knew this was...
That's where I noticed her.
Okay.
That's where it began.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
This began at the first event.
Okay. Oh.
So apparently I have a yes face. If you're a speaker, I'm the one in the
Yeah,
audience.
Brooks
that's,
and Katie is the one
smiling and
who
nodding.
told her
Yes
that she
face.
has a yes face.
Yeah.
He
So.
says in an audience, most people have neutral or even
Like a
frowny
yes
faces.
face.
Yeah,
She has-
Okay.
so I have a yes.
So-
So, anyways,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
where our story began.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
in terms of that call, I think something that powerful that happened to me after that conference, I was really excited about this vision, and I remember praying. It was my last year of university, and just being like, God, do you want me? I guess I had in my mind, I'm a nurse by profession, that I would live a typical North American life where I'd work at the hospital, live in a suburb, I guess, go to church. And I was just praying, God, do you want me to move into a high needs neighborhood or do missions or something like that? Or should I just do this plan that I had in my mind? And I just felt the Lord speak to me so powerfully that my defaults were wrong. So my default was the typical North American path. And I felt like the Lord tell me, those are not my godly defaults. Those aren't the defaults from heaven. And I felt that I just had this moment of surrender where I was like, okay, God, my new default will be to live among people who've never heard about you. I had in mind the slums in Asia. I was like, God, that is my new default unless you tell me something else. So yes, this is very much a shared vision that we have and something that we just love doing as a couple. Now as a family, we have a baby. So yeah.
And he's so cute.
Yeah.
Aw,
my
thanks.
goodness.
I think so too.
I follow him on social media. I mean, I follow you on social media, but
Him, he's
Jim,
got his own
Yes.
does he have his own
No,
account?
No.
No.
Okay, I was like,
No, I follow you on social media, and
He
he
has
takes
his
up a
hashtag.
lot of
Yeah.
that space.
yeah, what does it mean though, like when you're saying move in to the neighborhood? Because some people would say, well, my neighborhood is filled with people already, so that's fine. Like I've got a lot of different people that I can access or connect with or make an impact to. But there's something intentional, very intentional about what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
We're very strict just because the Lord has given us a very clear mission. So we only move in to neighborhoods, and so we're limited, and that's why we need the wider body of Christ. But we only move into neighborhoods that are poor or very poor, that have unreached people groups in them, and that are very densely populated. So we need all three. And we find them, and then we mobilize people to move into them and be regular believers, have a job, and yet to live here instead of here.
Right.
And the one requirement, we don't have paperwork. Somehow we pulled that off. And it's really cool, yeah. But there is one requirement after moving in, and that is to pray together weekly as a team of regular people and to dedicate an evening to prayer. So all 80 teams in the world have that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a story of I mean, you probably have 1,000 stories from 1,000 of places this happens, but tell us one or two. Like what is this like?
Yeah.
How has this played out over the last 9 years?
Yeah, I'll tell one of, I led there's a few families that have come to know Christ in our neighborhood, and from background, we call them unreached people groups. So that means people who for 1,000 years, generation after generation, have never heard about Jesus. So it's so exciting to see these families come to know Christ. And I started a Bible study with some of the teenage girls that were in these families. And one of them, she had a new Canadian friend. She said, can I bring my friend? She's interested in God. She's interested in church. But her family's not interested. They don't want to go to church with her. So I said, sure, bring her to our Bible study. And yeah, to make a long story short, by God's grace, she gave her life to Jesus, and one of the biggest joys of my life was baptizing her in Lake Ontario. So yeah, it was exciting. So that's one story out of one team, out of the whole movement.
Yeah.
And that's just from being there. It's just being within the community to have that kind of access, but to have the relationship and to start that relationship.
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing. Nigel, what about you?
So especially in the early years, our prayer meeting went late. The first year it went till 1 a.m. We've pared it down to about 10 now. But we had a couple of boys from a Roma background from Europe whose parents were happy to send them to our prayer meeting. And they weren't even Christians yet. So these little boys, about 8 and 10, sat in our prayer meeting at that time, sometimes until 11, which I look back now and I'm like, wow. There was a change in governments and the new government decided to deport almost all Roma peoples who had been given access to Ontario. And so these boys told us, or either they or their parents, somebody told us that they were going to be deported back to Europe. By this point, they had become believers. They loved sitting in our prayer meeting, and now we're actively involved. And when we had worship music, they'd raise their hands, and it's super cute. And then, yeah, the time came where it would be their last week in our prayer meeting. And so we decided to do a missionary commissioning for these boys, to commission them to be missionaries as they return back to the Roma people, which have been marginalized in Europe for 1,000 years as well. And so we commissioned them, and Jessie had an EvangeCube, and she taught them.
By the way, someone gave it to me, and I'm like, this is really
The day before. Yeah.
And I'm like, what am I going to do with it? It's like a cube where you can change the pictures to share the
Yeah.
gospel.
So I kind of discredit it, and I confessed that wasn't honoring, but God used it because I gave it to this little boy, and suddenly he's like, oh, this is like, he knew how to share the gospel. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and one other story is an elderly Japanese lady was led to Christ by one of our team members. And then she joined our team and began knocking on the doors of our unreached people neighbors. And, you know, just amazing stories. Another story, just to give you a teaser, and this could launch off, but we won't let it unless you really want to, which is that we got married in our neighborhood, and 1,200 people came to our wedding. We had 2 ceremonies and 2 3-hour receptions in the same day. 500 people at the first wedding, 700 the second wedding. We gave away Bibles. This is in a poor neighborhood, and we received, you won't believe this, from our neighbors, $16,000
What?
of wedding gifts. Wow. Yeah, like it's
So
mind-blowing.
generous. So generous.
Yeah, it was an amazing day.
Yeah.
That's incredible because of you having the relationship and being with them.
Just
Yeah,
generous hearts.
and everyone brought food from their culture.
Oh,
We
that
had
would be
beautiful white
incredible.
tents and chairs, and it was gorgeous, and lights, and 1,200 people came. Everyone was fed, had dinner.
Yeah.
And to fit everyone, we had 2 full ceremonies, like identical.
Amazing.
Vows, walked down the aisle twice. And it was pretty amazing.
Nigel, Jessie, can anybody move in? Like, this sounds amazing, but is it for all of us? Should it be? Should there be a part of it? Because when you hear these things, that's always the question. Well, is it really for me?
Yeah.
Is it for everybody? Or is it just some people are called to that, some people aren't?
Yeah.
What would you say? Because 1 billion is a lot of people.
Yeah.
And there's, like, especially where you're talking, high density, lots of people in one small area.
Yeah.
Is it for everybody, or what can we do?
So it isn't for everyone in the sense that we all have different callings. And so move-in's a limited vision. It's not going to reach the wealthy. It does in roundabout ways, but it's not going to do a lot of things. And that keeps us humble, and it reminds us of the tapestry that we're part of. But it is for everyone in the sense that we don't do applications intentionally because we believe there needs to be something for regular people. And anybody can join Move In and be part of it who's a believer. Actually, even if you're not, we might welcome you and introduce you to Jesus. You know? So, I've had interesting emails from people. It's not for everyone in the sense that we all have different callings. But I will say we all need to be radically faithful. We all need to challenge our defaults, as Jessie said. And we all need to have in our dying breaths a sense that we didn't waste a day of our life.
How can one, because I love this vision, but I also, wisdom and maturity says check your heart. Are you called to this? Because it's a commitment. You can't just build relationship and then take off. You gotta have a heart for it. But if I wanted to support, how can someone come alongside? What can they do if they just want to support the vision of this? Because it's so good.
Yeah. Well, one of the most important things about Move In is that move-inners, who are the regular people who are moved in, are supported by their churches and their friends and their family. And that's critical. And that health that they receive from their community helps them to keep going and to pass that on to their neighbors. So that moral support, prayer support, sending somebody a text saying you're praying for them. Yeah, there are other ways too, but we love to do everything relationally. One of our core values is relationships, so yeah.
But it must be hard,
There have
right?
been
I just want to
times-
be honest, because I'm thinking, I mean, you are choosing to move into an area that's so not like you, and not the comforts that you're used to, the people that you're used to, and it really
And
has to be
raising like the next gen. You said
generation.
70 of move-inners are children.
Yeah,
children.
absolutely, and
adults
most of them are
making
babies.
decisions.
And then with your kids,
Yeah.
it's not just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
just you're a single person or you're just two people. You've now got a
Yeah.
family.
Well, like I have a brother who lives in Central Asia, and people are like horrified that he would bring his children there. And so I'm curious about that in like the hardship. I'm saying this in quotations because it's from the outside, right? You know, viewed as like the hardships of now it's not just you. It's not just you as a single guy. Now it's you
It's
as a
the family,
couple.
yeah.
Oh, and now you're growing
Yeah.
you are
Yeah.
and are growing a family.
Yeah.
And what does
Yeah.
that look
Yeah,
like?
and it's got to be hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jessie?
Why don't you start?
Well, I'll just tell a quick story. When we were newly married, I was getting ready for bed, and I saw a little critter run across the bed. And, I won't name what it was, but it will scare you ladies. And I was just like, Lord, I can't sleep in this bed anymore. and I just
Have the grace to pray.
Yeah.
I felt the Lord say, Jessie, I died so that people could know me. Like, this is nothing. And I was just like, amen, that's true. It's really not a big deal. And I just had this, I think it's just a perspective shift. And so, yeah, there are discomforts. There's pests, as I said. There's the heartbreak of journeying through terrible circumstances that people go through. Yeah, it can be challenging. And yet, when we keep our eyes on eternity, that's what makes it worth it. It's like, this is going to impact eternity. People will know Jesus who didn't know him before. And something that really touches me is we have teams living in slums in Asia with their children. And I'm just so in awe of how like God is using them in incredible ways. There only 1 in 1,000 missionaries lives in the bottom billion. Like 1 in 7 people in the world are like life-threateningly poor, and only 1 in 1,000 missionaries lives among them. And so it's hard. It can be really hard, especially in those contexts. But it's so worth it because, whenever we visit them, we're just in awe of what God's doing through them. So.
Nigel, what about you? So just put the hard part for you.
So I had a nervous breakdown in January 2012 from the pressures, including of, leading this movement. I was 27 when it started, and suddenly I had to find $1,000 every 3 days to fund what was happening. And God determined that I could handle it, but my body decided it couldn't. And so I didn't fully recover from that burnout for 5 years, which was last year.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it did become, and I had depression for 18 months, full blown. And it did become, I'm just gonna keep going because I think that's what God wants me to do. Now the joy's returned, which is great, because if anyone is watching who has depression, I can really relate, because the hope was gone and all I had was faith that it could return. And it did, which is great. It's great to have the passion back. But for 5 years, it wasn't there. But I just kept going, believing that what I was doing made a difference, and that the bottom billion needed people to persevere for them. So.
And I'm so glad the two of you are together, because I think that
Yeah,
Jessie
totally.
with you, I think that's probably how you got through as well.
Yeah, and it helps that she's so good looking too.
Yes.
Nice necklace. What do you think?
Well, she's leaving that here with us.
Joe, you had a question.
Well, I mean, it's exactly out of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So for you and your teams, how do you care for yourselves? Like, what are some ways that if you're going to do this, as you said, if you're going to do this in the long term, What are some rhythms that you've built into life too? Because it is so intense, and so like go on vacation or
Yeah.
You want to start?
Nigel's always telling, especially our teams in slums, go on vacation, go on
Yeah,
vacation. We're
seriously.
very pro rest.
I tell them
pro
I want to be that
Sabbath.
little voice on the shoulder
Yep.
saying, go on a
what I-
holiday.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And yes, we live in a lower income community, but how can we make our homes nice, comfortable, beautiful places to live?
Restful,
And these are homes where we're sharing about Jesus with people. So how can we create those atmospheres and I don't know, rest, exercise.
I drive 2 hours out of Toronto periodically and go to the woods.
Oh, that's
I have
That's awesome.
I have a tent in the woods.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'll have to
really?
show you pictures.
like
it's a glamping.
permanently.
Oh, it's
there? Is that what
glamping.
you mean?
It's a glamping.
Oh, it's a glamping tent.
And
Okay.
it's pretty cool. So that's
is
one of
cool.
my things
That's
that keeps me sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
That's amazing. And you know, when I read John 1:14 from the Message, and it says, "The Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood."
Exactly.
I look at the two of you and go, "You're doing that." And there is cost. There is
Yeah.
physical and emotional cost, and there's cost. But it's so encouraging to hear that you feel this is the call of God in your life. That there's the need for people to know about Jesus and the hope that comes with knowing Him and being in relationship with Him. And so it's beautiful. I think that verse is amazing because it says, you know, that's what He did.
Yeah.
He moved into the neighborhood.
That's been a theme verse for us from day one, including the Message rendering of it, that he moved into the neighborhood. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So encouraging and so inspiring. How can we find out more information about Move In?
Movein.to
Okay.
is the website, and find a move-inner. Most of the people watching know a move-inner or are 1 degree removed. So find that move-inner in your life.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. And learn more that way.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Nigel, Jessie, Cheryl, Joanna, thank you so much for your thoughts. Really appreciate that, and that's movein.to.
Exactly.
Because I think all of you viewers, and even myself, we need to like support and pray, financially support, do what we can to help your incredible teams all over the world. And imagine that just started with this dream, and then internationally, what God can do.
It's pretty cool.
Incredible. Well, to you viewers, we hope that this show inspired you, inspired us to think again about what it means to move into the neighborhood, to be flesh and blood to our neighbors, and because of what Jesus has done for us, how are we to love one another as we follow Him? What is He asking of you and for you and from you? And so take some time today to think and pray and to listen, and then be encouraged to step out in faith, just like, you know, the Pauls did here. It could be that, it could be just something simple, but do something today that will make a difference in your community and world. And if we can help you in any way, please connect with us on seehearlove.com. We'd love to pray for you, answer any questions, and read our blogs. We've got lots of information and resources, as well as we're going to be featuring Move In on our website too. If you're interested in Move In, make sure you go to movein.to. And as always, know that you are seen, heard, and deeply loved by God. Bye-bye.